Some tales are told, then soon forgotten. But a legend is forever. Leatherface, Texas Chainsaw Massacre 3. Now, from the producers of A Nightmare on Elm Street, the real terror begins November 3rd.
Alright, good evening and welcome back to my YouTube reviews. Today I will be reviewing 1990's Leatherface, the Texas Chainsaw Massacre 3. It's directed by Jeff Burr, starring Kate Hodge, Ken Foray, Viggo Mortensen, and William Butler. I about butchered Viggo Mortensen's last name. Probably did. That's kind of a difficult last name for me to pronounce. But this movie is the third film in the Texas Chainsaw Massacre franchise. This movie basically was a back-to-basics attempt. Part 2 came out in 1986, released through Cannon Films. And Cannon Films, I think by this time, was, if not bankrupt, they were on the very edge of it. And, I mean, they're no longer around now, but Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2, I love that movie. Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2, I love that movie from start to finish. To me, it's just a wild ride. It's an out there film at times, but I love it, every minute of it. Dennis Hopper, Caroline Williams. I mean, you just got a great film. And, I mean, Tobe Hooper came back to direct the sequel. It was written by Ellen Kit Carson. And, I mean, you've got Bill Moseley also in there. Jim Sedal's back again as Drayton. I think it's all as far. And Bill Johnson as Leatherface. But this movie, like I said, you've got Kate Hodge, Ken Foray, Viggo Mortensen, William Butler, and you've got Ari Mihailoff as Leatherface. You've got also Joe Unger as Tinker Sawyer. Can't remember the guy's name that plays Alfredo. Or you've got Jennifer Banco, who plays the little girl, the little Sawyer, who is inferred, or it's suggested that it's Leatherface's daughter. So this movie was kind of born out of a name only. It was put together, a trailer was put together in 1989. That was originally when it was supposed to be released. And if it tells you anything, that was when it was supposed to be released, that this was not a very pleasant production. This was the first to be distributed through New Line Cinema. They were going to do both the remake and its prequel in the mid-2000s. And Leatherface, Texas Chainsaw Massacre 3, like I said, it was born of a title only, no script or anything. And the trailer is one of the best horror trailers there's ever been. I mean, you've got Leatherface, and that played by Kane Hodder. A very cool-looking Leatherface. Not too off from the one we get in the movie. But, basically it's a parody on Lady of the Lake, and where, instead of, Excalibur comes up out of the water, it's, the chainsaw, the golden chainsaw that's in the movie, the Sawers family, and she throws it up, and then Leatherface catches it and turns it on. Leatherface, Texas Chainsaw Massacre Part 3, or 3. This movie, it was, the big spearhead with this movie was, Michael DeLuca. who was new to the franchise. I believe this was the first film he had kind of spearheaded when he became a part of New Line Cinema. And he was kind of the horror hound in that whole production company. So, I mean, he was kind of the one responsible for a lot of the horror movies that came afterwards. And with this movie, while I think it's a very good movie, it's one of those where it was chopped up by the MPAA. The MPAA cut this movie to shreds. I mean, the previous movie, it more so was cut due to pacing issues here and there. This movie was cut due to gore. I mean, originally, this was going to be a back-to-basics horror movie, or back-to-basics movie for the franchise, by all accounts. But the script, I believe the guy who wrote this movie is David J. Shaw, who he actually wrote the prequel to the remake in 2006 as well. His original script was a lot more brutal, a lot more dark, and basically for a movie, an original movie that was very brutal in nature and very dark. New Line Cinema they wanted the film cut out. Basically, from what I heard, that they wanted someone to take the place of Freddy. They wanted, they were planning on kind of getting rid of Freddy and they were going to put him in as kind of the star. And they wanted it to focus on Leatherface. And, they wanted basically Leatherface to become the star of the show and be the slasher, this slasher titan for the franchise. And eventually, they were in talks of doing a whole franchise based off of this, and this movie was supposed to start a new franchise, but eventually did not. And I mean, like I said, the film was cut down very drastically, and they wanted this movie. The original script was very dark, but the people at New Line wanted something more accessible, as basically the only way I can describe it. And they wanted this to be a more commercial franchise, which, if you think about it, this is not a commercial franchise at all. And I mean, 2, yeah, it's a great film, but it's still not it's not a commercial horror movie. And I mean, the whole plot of this movie is really, you got this couple going through Texas on the way to I think to California or New York or something like that. I can't remember exactly where they were going to, or they were from California or something like that. They come across this gas station. They meet some interesting characters. Alfredo, who's a very interesting character. Viggo Mortensen's character. If I'm not pronouncing his name right, I'm sorry. I'm probably butchering his name. But, I mean, eventually they come face to face with Leatherface. You meet this other woman that, she had a previous encounter with Leatherface prior, and, eventually, she's killed, and, it's eventually the whole thing to where it's the dinner scene, and then she escapes. There's a big fire. Ken Foray's character, who is a survivalist, he comes in and shoots, just starts shooting into the house and basically kills a lot of the people in the house. And there's a little bit of backstory with him, or a little bit of story with him after the whole film. But eventually, it's basically shown that Leatherface survives the whole thing, and basically is supposed to continue up with something else. But I mean, you've got the whole dinner scene, as with the previous movies, of course, and I mean, the dinner scene's what at that point everyone knew the series for, because you had this just outlandish, just off the wall dinner scenes in the movies. I mean, it would make, if it was real people, it'd probably make them go crazy or delusional. And I mean, it's a pretty good one here. I mean, this girl's sitting in a chair, and basically they nail nails through her hands into the chair. She basically watches her friend get hit in the face and cut up by right there in front of her. I mean, it tries to play it really hardcore, but at the same time, it doesn't have enough brutalness to support what they were trying to do. I mean, I think all of the hardcore elements that were supposed to be in the movie were taken out by the MPAA, and the movie that was supposed to be made did not get made because of them. And I mean, I find it real puzzling about the whole New Line not wanting this hardcore slasher film. I find that real weird, but I mean, it is what it is. And I mean, I like this movie. I think it's a very good movie. If you're going to watch a cut of the movie, watch the unrated cut. Like I said, this is it's an interesting film. I mean, there's a documentary out there on YouTube you can watch. A very interesting film, by all means. The director of this movie, Jeff Burr, was fired, I believe, when it was like 5 weeks into shooting or something like that. Or like, I can't remember exactly when it was, or like it was 2 weeks left in shooting, and he was fired, and then they couldn't find no one else to take over the job, so he was brought back, and that was the biggest thing. They could never find no one to helm the project. And no one had any ideas for the character at the time, I don't guess. And I mean, I like this movie. I give it probably an 8 out of 10, 7 out of 10, something like that. I like this movie. I mean, K&B Effects, for the effects that are in the movie, they do a very good job. I mean, K&B, they're one of my favorite effects companies. And I mean, I've always loved K&B. With their work on From Dusk Till Dawn, especially Jason Goes to Hell, which is a very polarizing film in that franchise. And that's a word you've probably heard me use a lot by now, polarizing. But Leatherface, Texas Chainsaw Massacre 3, also is more or less not a part 3 or a 3, because this is more or less a reboot in its own continuity. It's revealed, I think, that Sally Hardesty died in 1981. You've got this whole thing, W.E. Sawyer, who I think was supposedly gassed, and that doesn't happen. He was gassed, but it's supposedly that it was a ploy for Leatherface, and then basically, Caroline Williams is in it as Stretch, as a reporter, and that's what the director said, that he picked her as a reporter, so that's the reason she has a cameo. And, this was also not shot in Texas. This was the first of the series at this point not to be shot in Texas. It was shot in California, and it was shot around a amusement park, I believe, and it said that in the movie, if you listen closely, you can hear some of the screams that's actually in the movie, from the rides, some of the screams from the ride, which I think adds a very interesting effect. I've never heard them, but if that is the case, that's a very interesting effect. And basically, Jeff Burr, he wanted to make a straight-up Texas Chainsaw Massacre film. He wanted to bring back the original Leatherface, Gunnar Hansen. And by that time, I mean, I think he decided not to, and it was, like I said, a very controversial production. Um, it, the MPA cut this movie to shreds. It was, the company didn't want to release an X-rated film, because of, if they released that, then it would not be it would automatically be thrown out, pretty much, or a throwaway film. And I mean, that's kind of unfortunate. The unrated cut of this movie still is not the most unrated version. It's more or less some of the footage edited back in. From what I heard, it was kind of like some of the Friday movies. It was some of the footage was lost, and that's unfortunate. But also with Ken Foray's character, I said I was going to touch on kind of some story on him. His character was originally, in the original version of the movie, his character was killed. In H2O, which I didn't talk about, actually. I did not talk about LL Cool J's character in Halloween H2O. His character is killed. And if you're hearing H2O before now, or if after this, then just know I didn't talk about LL Cool J's character. But his character was originally killed, but expressed interest in coming back for the sequel, so they kind of played it off like it was just the bullet grazed him, is the way he described it. Ken Foray's character is shown to be severely cut with a chainsaw, but it comes back at the end. I have nothing against that, because I like the character. I thought the character was really good. He was a survivalist, and there's a pretty common theme of the Armageddon in this film. And I mean, you have Alfredo talking about the whole, he's hollering Armageddon. Ken Foray's talking about he's in this thing that they train him for survival through Armageddon. It's very interesting. I love when movies kind of throw some detailed stuff like that in there, and they do that with this film. And I thought that was pretty interesting. He's shown to be killed. He's shown to have his head shoved onto a chainsaw, but I mean, that was another thing cut out. There's so much gore and stuff that was cut out of this movie. You have to watch the documentary to see some of the scenes that were cut out. And his character survived, and he was supposed to come back possibly for a sequel. And the sequel just really never materialized. And then they produced, it was independently released, Texas Chainsaw Massacre: The Next Generation, which is another interesting movie, which I haven't watched that in a long time. But, his character does survive, and was supposed to come back for potential sequels. That, of course, they never materialized. And eventually, the kind of rights went AWOL, and they killed Freddy off in 1991. And I mean, I'll talk about Freddy's Dead one day. I kind of defend that film, actually. I think that was a pretty good film for what it was trying to be. They later acquired the rights to the Jason character in 92, I believe it was. And they would release Jason Goes to Hell. And, this has been my review of Leatherface, the Texas Chainsaw Massacre 3. A flawed film, that's for sure. You could tell it's cut pretty drastically. In the same way you can tell Friday the 13th Part 7's cut. I like this movie. it is a kind of it's a return to the hardcore horror. You've got some great characters. Also, the Sawyers in this movie set up traps in the woods, which I thought was a pretty cool idea as well. But I give this movie I guess I'm gonna give it an 8 out of 10. I gave the last couple of movies that I've done 7 out of 10. I'm gonna give this 8 out of 10. I like this movie. It's a flawed movie, that's for darn sure. It's a flawed film, but I do like it. There's supposed to be another movie coming out soon. It's not really known when yet. I think they've got the producers for the directors for the movie, but they don't have the whole production started yet, in which right now they really can't because things are so up in the air right now. But I hope you enjoyed this review. Like, comment, subscribe. Just tell me what you think of this. Another horror movie review, and been making some long reviews, so hope you're enjoying them every bit. I'm starting a new format, so hope you like them. Tell me what you think of them in the comments below. Hope you enjoy this, and see you next time.